shift, the stakes are high. The mag breaks it down, no need to sigh. From EU rules to global news, Reg with Mag, your trusted views.
Welcome to Reg with Mag's weekly regulatory roundup. This week we have two major updates from the FDA that are going to impact a lot of you. First, we'll be diving into the long-awaited final guidance on clinical decision support software.
That one's been on everyone's radar.
Exactly. And then we'll shift gears to discuss the monumental transition to the Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR. The age of the QSR is officially over.
It's a huge shift, a lot to unpack for manufacturers. Let's get into it.
All right, so first up, the final guidance on clinical decision support software, which dropped on January 29th, 2026. The big question this guidance aims to answer is one the industry has wrestled with for years. When is our CDS software officially considered a medical device?
Right, and that classification is everything. It dictates the entire regulatory pathway, the level of scrutiny, the documentation, everything.
Absolutely. The guidance lays out criteria based on the IMDRF risk framework and the 21st Century Cures Act. One of the most significant clarifications is around the term independent review.
Okay, that's a key point because previously the definition felt a bit ambiguous. How does the new guidance define it?
It's much clearer now. The guidance states that for software to be considered a non-device CDS, it must allow the healthcare professional to independently review the basis for the recommendation. This means the user can't just see the output, they have to be able to access the underlying data and logic to reach their own conclusion without relying primarily on the software.
That makes sense. So it's not just about agreeing or disagreeing with the software suggestion, but about having the tools to verify it from the ground up.
Precisely. If the software is a black box where you can't see the why, it's more likely to be regulated as a device. The FDA wants to ensure the human expert remains firmly in the driver's seat. They also expanded the examples of non-device versus device CDS, which is incredibly helpful.
Oh, good. Concrete examples are always the best part of any guidance document. What kind of things are they highlighting?
For non-device CDS, they list things like software that provides recommendations for a patient with a specific condition based on published clinical guidelines, or a tool that highlights abnormal lab results and provides links to relevant medical literature for the physician to review.
Okay, so the theme is providing information and context, not a definitive diagnosis or treatment plan.
Exactly. On the device CDS side, they give examples like software that analyzes a patient's ECG to detect an arrhythmia and sounds an immediate alarm, or software that uses a proprietary algorithm to calculate a specific drug dosage for a critical care patient. The stakes are higher, and the healthcare provider's ability to independently verify it in real time is limited.
That distinction is crucial. It really clarifies the line between being an informational tool and being a diagnostic or therapeutic one.
Now, another huge piece of this, especially with the rise of AI and machine learning, is the emphasis on transparency.
The black box problem.
The very same. The guidance is clear. The sources of data, the logic, and the algorithms used by the CDS must be transparent to the user. For an AI/ML system, this means developers need to be able to explain how the model works and what data it was trained on. They need to describe the relevance and validation of the inputs.
And that is a major technical and documentation challenge. It's not just about building a model that works, it's about building one that is explainable and trustworthy to a clinical user.
Absolutely. So for our listeners in software development and regulatory, the takeaway here is documentation, documentation, documentation. You need to clearly define your software's intended use, its inputs, its logic, and how a clinician can perform that independent review. If you can't, you're likely heading down the path of a medical device submission.
It seems like a good time to review your product labeling and user manuals as well, to make sure the claims you're making align with the non-device criteria if that's the path you're aiming for.
And excellent point. Your marketing materials and your intended use statement have to be perfectly aligned with the functionality and transparency of the tool itself. This guidance really tightens the screws on that.
So what does this mean for innovation? Do you think this will slow down the development of more advanced AI-driven tools?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't think it's meant to slow innovation, but rather to direct it down a safer, more transparent path. The FDA isn't saying don't use complex algorithms. They're saying if you use them for high-risk functions, you need to validate them and be prepared for the appropriate level of oversight.
Right. It's about matching the regulatory burden to the risk. And for companies that were maybe trying to fly under the radar, this guidance makes that much more difficult.
It does. It forces an earlier and more critical conversation within development teams. Are we a device or not? And making that decision early saves a world of pain later. I think overall it's a positive step for patient safety and for building trust in these powerful new technologies.
I agree. Clarity is always good for the industry in the long run. It provides a clearer roadmap for everyone.
Okay, shifting from the digital world to the very physical world of manufacturing, let's talk about the other bombshell news. As of February 2nd, 2026, the FDA has officially transitioned to the Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR.
This is the end of an era. We've all lived and breathed the quality system regulation, 21 CFR 820, for decades. It's a fundamental change.
It really is. The new QMSR essentially replaces the old QSR by incorporating by reference the international standard ISO 13485-2016. So manufacturers now have to comply with ISO 13485-2016 plus a few additional FDA requirements that were carved out.
And it's important to stress a point that seems to cause some confusion. The FDA is not requiring manufacturers to get ISO 13485 certification.
That is the critical point. You don't need the certificate on your wall, but you absolutely must be in compliance with the requirements of the standard. Your quality system has to be built on it. The FDA will be inspecting against it.
So, for manufacturers listening, what are the first steps? If they haven't started already, what should they be doing right now?
The absolute first step is a gap assessment. You need to take your current QSR-based quality system and compare it line by line against the requirements of ISO 13485-2016. There's a lot of overlap, but there are also significant differences.
Risk management is a big one. ISO 13485 has a much more pervasive life cycle approach to risk management than the old QSR did. It's not just about design, it's integrated everywhere.
Yes, that's probably the biggest philosophical shift. You can expect FDA inspectors to be laser focused on your risk management file and how it connects to everything from design controls to supplier management to post-market surveillance.
So after the gap assessment, it's a massive documentation update, updating SOPs, work instructions, quality manuals. Everything needs to be revised to align with the new structure and terminology.
Exactly. And once the procedures are updated, you have to train everyone. And I mean everyone, from the assembly line to the executive management. They all need to understand the new framework, especially that enhanced focus on risk.
That training piece can't be underestimated. It's a cultural shift as much as it is a procedural one. It's about getting the entire organization to think in terms of risk-based decision-making.
Another area the FDA has signaled it will be focusing on during inspections is the control over outsourced processes.
Ah, supplier controls. That's always a hot topic. But ISO 13485 puts an even finer point on it, right?
It does. The standard requires risk-based controls for your suppliers and any outsourced process. This means you can't just have a one-size-fits-all supplier qualification program. The level of control and scrutiny you apply must be proportional to the risk associated with that supplier's product or service.
So, for a critical component supplier, you'd need a much more rigorous qualification, auditing, and monitoring process than for, say, a supplier of off-the-shelf lab equipment.
Precisely. And you need to document the justification for why you've chosen that level of control. It all comes back to that documented, risk-based approach. The FDA wants to see that you've thought critically about your entire supply chain.
While this transition sounds like a monumental amount of work, and it is, there are some significant long-term benefits, especially for companies that market their products globally.
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge step towards global harmonization. For years, manufacturers selling in the US and Europe, for example, have had to maintain systems that satisfy both the QSR and ISO 13485. It could be redundant and sometimes conflicting.
Right. Now, by aligning with the global standard, it streamlines the process. A single robust quality management system can now satisfy the requirements of multiple regulatory bodies. It reduces complexity and overhead.
It does. In the long run, it should be more efficient, but the short-term challenge is real. For smaller companies or those with very mature legacy QSR systems, this transition is a heavy lift. They may not have the internal expertise or resources to manage it without outside help.
That's a good point. And even for large companies, changing the direction of that ship takes time and a concerted effort. They need to ensure consistency across different sites and business units.
So, the key message for our listeners is don't underestimate the effort. Start with a thorough gap assessment, create a detailed implementation plan with clear timelines and responsibilities, and invest heavily in training. The FDA's transition period is over, and their expectation is full compliance now.
And document everything. If an inspector asks why you made a certain decision, the answer should be in your risk management file.
That's the perfect summary. It's the new mantra of quality management.
Before we summarize, you mentioned there were a few additional FDA requirements carved out. What are those? I think our listeners would be keen to know that the QMSR isn't just a pure adoption of ISO 13485.
Excellent point. The FDA did retain some specific requirements from the old QSR. For instance, the QMSR includes requirements for the control of records for device labeling and packaging that are more prescriptive than ISO 13485. They want to ensure that all labeling and packaging records are maintained and a designated individual approves them before release. So, two massive updates this week, a much clearer line in the sand for clinical decision support software, and a whole new quality system paradigm with the QMSR.
Both really pushing the industry towards greater transparency, risk management, and global alignment. Lots of work ahead for everyone.
Indeed. That's all the time we have for this week's Roundup. Stay informed and stay compliant. Bye, guys.